covering all your favorite parts of the 50-yard fight. This is the Inside the Walls podcast with Zach Heilman and Jim Mernier.
Welcome in, fans of the 50-Yard Fight. This is the Inside the Walls podcast. Zach Heilman back in studio after a few weeks of, let's just say, life and work having things get in the way. But I'm glad to be back on the show and back here for episode 124 of the Inside the Walls podcast, NAL Rebound edition, week 17. Glad we get to jump on. Been watching the games. Really some fascinating matchups this past weekend. One I think that was, I would say, very unexpected, and one that we were wondering really about the starting rosters and how that could impact the matchup and the playoff implications and home field standing of one team. We'll jump into all of this week and much more as I get to finally reconvene a little bit more and get to finally chat on camera, in person again once more with my buddy, pal, co-host, the guy that I think is the Adam Schefter of the NAL and arena football in my eyes. It is Jim Mernier, and I'm glad to be bringing him back on and getting to finally chat with him once more. It is I know it's only been 2 weeks. It's been too long. I'm glad to be here with you and getting to chat. Glad to see that you got to sit in and have Phil and Ralph on and get some trifecta coverage, if you will, kind of like more of a panel. Nice to see you guys on there, but glad to be back on. And let's just say last week, and I'll let you, of course, touch on this, but last week I think outcomes both surprising, although for different reasons, and I think stuff that we'll touch on that obviously is some context to both of those reasons.
Yeah. This is the final NAL Rebound of the 2023 season.
Last regular season version. We'll be talking championship coming up here soon.
Oh, wow. It's been a hell of a ride this season. A lot of ups and downs, drama-filled, excitement, upsets, comebacks, historical blowouts, and we're down to 4 teams for the reign of the year because of the postseason. It's win or go home time. But yes, again, Zach, welcome back. It's been a long time. We've been in constant communication. But it was cool to have Phil on. It was cool to have Ralph on. And it was cool to have Joshua Jackson on to help fill the mold. But that's one thing about Inside the Walls podcast. No matter if it's you missing a couple episodes or me missing a couple episodes, we can always find people in our community that can jump right in, fill those shoes, and still produce a great episode of Inside the Walls. Let's just say last week, week 17, if a lot of our listeners listened to me and Phil, we talked about the games, and you had stuff ready to send my way, unfortunately, due to time constraints and your work and our production time. A misstep. Let's talk about what you thought before entering last week's games, not even when the games actually are played or results. We'll talk about the results later, but what were your thoughts pre-week 17?
Well, I appreciate you giving me that opportunity because I didn't feel like I earned that since I didn't give you the videos. But I'll be real quick. Entering into week 17, I'm looking at for Sharks Cobras. My thing was, who's playing for the Sharks? Are we going to do a full starting roster and we're going to be playing full bore against the Cobras? Make this a regular season finish and strong. Put full forces behind it and put Sam Castronova out there to play, or do we kind of step some things back? Do we put in Eddie Brill? Do we, maybe we don't run everything at full force, but maybe we try and be competitive and put out a good product, at least something that we can get out there. We can kind of view the Cobras and then put that to the side for maybe if that scenario comes up in the championship game, because they won't be playing them next week. They'll be playing the Preds, as that's been established a few weeks for already. For the Preds and Warbirds, honestly, I just wanted the Predators to come out. I thought it would be more of just get a good win under you and get some positive momentum towards your game against Jacksonville, and just to see what it was going to be like in the QB room, as we always find out with Orlando this year. Is Joseph Hess back under center? Did Rakeem Cato, is he getting that shot? What's the deal with Rakeem Cato these days? That's what we were waiting on. We saw a little bit of both of those in this last week, and I think both those answers came out into fruition for week 17. As Jacksonville, we'll talk about a little bit here as we get into games. They played the safe approach, and I think West Texas finished on a really strong note and has to feel great about themselves wherever they're going to be on their destination after this year. It's a good final send-off, and it was a really nice crowd at the Actor Memorial Coliseum. Very loud, very into it. It's good to get that third win under their belt to end the year.
Well, it was a good win. And based on your assumptions, you thought the same as I did that what Jacksonville was going to do. Like, Eddie Brill, a couple players didn't make the trip. They're going to get a couple of good possessions in. You're going to see a lot of these players have a lot of rest time. And, that's what happened.
Right.
It's not a shock. But out west in Odessa, it was more of a West Texas team that was in a lot of these games at the end, just couldn't pull it off. And Orlando going out there, like warm-up game before the playoffs, trying to get a couple things right. Turned out to not be a warm-up game for them. And West Texas kind of stunned them. And you look on the other side of the field with Carolina and up in Greensboro, a team that basically knew that there was an opportunity to win the game, get the 2 seed, and they did so. I guarantee you Carolina players will say, maybe Zach Brown in our chat will say, that they could have played a better game. They knew they won't say it, but watching it, you knew Jacksonville was kind of going through the motions. Like, we're here. We get the 1 seed. When Sam Castronova doesn't start, tells you all your answers what Jacksonville was thinking in that game. And Eddie Brill, give him credit, kept the Sharks in the game.
He did.
Wasn't expecting that. But week 17 was so anticlimactic. It was almost like, we kind of predicted it. Because the seeds were already clinched. San Antonio and Carolina were either going to be the 2 or the 3 or vice versa. It wasn't going to change. We knew what Jacksonville or Orlando was going to be anyways. Orlando was going to travel to Jacksonville. So week 17 was really, there really wasn't no play-in game type of scenario what we could have had between West Texas and Orlando that never came to fruition. But now when you look to this weekend's games, the first round of the playoffs, you have one team in Carolina that's on a 5-game winning streak. You have Jacksonville, who's still on a roll. It just had a lot of players rest. A lot of people say, well, I think that's a bad idea for just Sharks to rest players. I don't think so, because if you rest players, your guys you will have more rest. They're home in the home environment. They already know who they're playing. Why risk getting major injuries to some of your key players in a meaningless game in week 17 for them? Carolina did what they had to do to get a 2 seed. San Antonio was off. Weren't going to do anything anyways. San Antonio was hoping that Jacksonville will win the game so they could host a playoff game. Unfortunately, that did not happen. But San Antonio already knew who they were going to play next week. It was already set in stone 2 weeks ago who they were going to face. It was just depending on the venue. That was it. And now we're down to 4 teams. We got the playoffs for West Texas. Hell of a first year in the NAL. Ups and downs. It happens. It's the business of the game. But one thing you guys can say this year, the Orlando Predators are part of your property because you brought the brooms out this year on them and swept them. Man, that's pretty good. So the Top Gunner is going off on that, by the way, on social media. It's like our Orlando, our house.
Hey, take wins where you can. That's how I'll ride with that. Because I'll be honest with you, that game shocked me just for the sake of the fact that even though the Preds have had a QB question, I think no matter what week it's been. Yes, Danny Southwick was on a trend for a few weeks, and we were thinking that was going to be it. They stabilize the QB, get someone that's like a Patrick O'Brien from 2 years ago, and that's it. They just need that, and then they can ride that course. That hasn't happened, and they've gone back to being kind of this chaotic, who do we throw behind center type of team. And you know what? I don't even think that's fully what costed them against West Texas. West Texas just wanted it more. I think they just wanted it that much more, even though both sides were I think we're just making some interesting play call choices and or some errors on the Easter end. West Texas, at the end of the day, I think just wanted it that much more than Orlando. And that's given the fact that Orlando on paper, you look at that roster, how do you tell me that roster loses to the Warbirds? And credit, the Warbirds have gotten some good additions too. Walter Thomas is on that team now. That was a recent end of the year signing. Trayvon Shorts had a heck of a game. You know, they got guys, Savante Davenport, I'm not knocking them. But if I'm looking roster to roster namings, Pred should be walking out of that building with a win and getting that 5th win under their belt to go into the playoffs. That is a big disappointment if you are Coach Walls and Ware, and especially owner John Chaney, who, why is he on the turf at the end of that game? I don't get it. But those three should be sitting there and looking at themselves in the mirror and going, we got to have some quick fixes. Otherwise, take it in next year and we need to reevaluate what we're doing once again.
And West Texas does have some solid players.
They do.
And inside the walls, I want to say, officially put our ballot in. Trayvon Schwartz got a recognition from us. So he's a dynamic player. Weber's a dynamic player. I talked to Weber when he was here in Jacksonville a couple weeks ago. Shared our thoughts with him. He appreciates it. He says, much respect to you, Zach.
Thank you.
West Texas is that type of team. Early in the year, they were trying to find themselves. They finally found themselves. They finally had a quarterback in Mitch Kidd. Mitch Kidd goes down with an injury. Then you go through a stretch where you play San Antonio. Seems like every single week for like the whole month of June. It's that feel like. And then, you get a break. It's Jacksonville. They went through a stretch where it was tough games. For them as an organization, Tate Smith, a coach that you can tell what type of game plan they're always trying to run. They have a good mindset and a good course they want to go to. And 2024 is going to be exciting for that organization. And they have talent there. They got players there that are guys that they can be key contributors for that organization in the future, like Cornelius Lewis, Trayvon Shorts, Weber, Childress, to name a few. But again, the offseason's unique. Free agency is a unique thing in this sport. And sometimes some of these players in our game just get to a certain age where they're like, I'm good. It's time. And there's a couple players that could be in that question this offseason for West Texas and any team in the NAL, for instance. But for West Texas, well, speaking of that, let's get into that before we get into our playoff talk, basically, or the other game. The final score was in overtime. No, wrong game.
No, wrong game.
Was in overtime. 43 to 47 or 43 to 37 final in overtime in Odessa. Very exciting finish in that game. Missed field goal at the end, almost was returned back for a rebound net kick.
It's close.
Kick 6 almost. But then Orlando went 4 and out. Odessa got the ball, went right down the field, and with a big time win. They were trying to challenge it. There were some challenges. That was just the guy was in the air and he never touched the ground. But
desperation challenge. That's all you can do. You have it, use it. But again, I get it. My main qualm with that was, again, why is John Chaney on the turf for that? An owner being on the turf, that's where
it was at. That's where the visiting team is. So it's easy
I'm
access.
Aware. I'm aware, but we're still in game. That's the thing. If it's end of game, I get it. But you're talking a guy that's talking directly to refs. That's where I'm getting. I wouldn't talk about this if it wasn't that you have him sitting there with other coaches trying to argue a case, because he shouldn't be there.
I see where but I think the game was officially called before that. So I think that's the reason why he was there.
If that's true, then I take my statement back. But if not,
Yeah, I understand. It's something I got to rewatch it, but I think it was after the replay was already finalized and they called the game. That's my opinion. But when you get into this game more, what really was stunning is that early in the game, it felt like Orlando was in their early groove. Cato looked pretty well. Hess came in, did a couple of good things. But then the second quarter happened and everything stopped. Like no points were scored in the second half or second quarter. 0.
Well, I ask again, where is what is the deal with Rakeem Cato right now? Because the second half, I see Joseph S come out, and I'm like, okay, that's fine, but didn't show an injury. He walked off on his own power. What's the
Yeah.
deal there? We'll never truly know unless someone says. But we don't go off rumors. We go off what's been told to us. But that was a fascinating element to the second half because Hess has been there and through the ringer, but you lose that mobility that Rakeem brings to your offense for a line that has had its moments of lapses, as we saw.
Correct.
Shai Hill feasted on the edge, by the way, this week.
Yes.
And Rakeem Cato felt it in the first half. He was beating Tolbert on a consistent basis off the right side.
Well, one of the things that I noticed about in this game that was very unlike him was Darius Prince. Darius Prince only had 90 receiving yards in this game, and that's kind of low for him.
It does.
For a guy that averages almost 140 to 150 a game. But when you look at overall, Trey Long was getting some.
Mm-hmm.
Clarence Williams was getting a couple catches. So it looked like the ball was being, where, like you like to say, diversify the portfolio. That was happening. But I could tell in this game, the quarterback stats for both guys scream inconsistency. 9 for 19, 6 for 13. One threw for 78 yards, the other one threw 135. Both total had 2 touchdown passes. Darius Prince had a touchdown pass. So that's 3 touchdown passes total. You're not going to win a lot of arena football games throwing for 3 touchdowns. I don't care if it's 1 quarterback or 4 quarterbacks. If you throw 3 touchdowns passing, you're not going to win any game. I don't care what level of the game you're in. But I got to give praise where praise is due for the Orlando side. And sometimes we don't give this guy any credit, but he's very secretly had a hell of a year. And that is none other than Dylan Barnos. He got himself a deuce. He was perfect on extra points. One thing I love about our game in arena football is that deuces in the kicking game is a weapon in our sport. It's not just like, oh, we got to go kick. Oh, here we go. It's crucial in our sport. Every touchdown, extra points are huge, and the deuces are even bigger. Dylan Barnos has been that bright spot for Orlando all year, in my opinion. Another bright spot for them is Freddie Blue Floyd. That's been a bright spot for them, and actually got recognition from inside the walls from the player ballots that were just officially announced or brought in, not officially announced yet. So the bright spots, I look at Orlando, especially this past game. The one guy that I want to say didn't really disappoint me, but I would hopefully would expect a little bit more from him was none other than Brandon Cisse. I know he plays. Yeah. He's a defensive. He's Iron Man. He plays both defense and offense. He's usually more of a beast on the defensive side than he is on the offensive side. Not saying that he's not a good player. I'm just saying that he wreaks more havoc on the defensive side of the ball than he does than on the offense. I didn't hear his name a lot this past week for tackles. And that is either a good thing or a bad thing. The good thing is maybe West Texas scheduled the game around him and avoid him, or he couldn't get to Chris Ware. That was one thing that really got me.
I think Chris Ware also is very slippery. He was had
yes.
a pretty solid job of being elusive in the pocket in several instances. Couldn't see Freddie Booth get back there. Cisse, even when Nick Hag would try and go for a blitz up one of the A gaps. They did get a few chances at him, but there were a few instances where it felt like Ware was a little more agile than he usually is in the backfield. I do think that those names should be called. When we talk about this roster, how it's been constructed right now, we're talking like there's a lot. If you look at on paper, there's quite a few all NAL talents names spread across both sides of the ball.
Correct.
And every week now being a little more unsure as to what the potential of this squad is at the moment, because at this point now, the whole your argument on earlier in the season on, well, they need to mesh and maybe it's going to take some time. Well, it's been some time.
It's been the whole season.
It's been now about, and with the guys from Albany coming in, it's now been about half a season. So what's the deal? You have a very talented on paper roster. This roster should
all-star
be
roster.
I mean, pretty much. I mean, you like defensive side. I can keep listing them off. I mean, Brandon Fuentes has been back more recently. He got burned a few times this game. I was kind of like, wow. I was kind of impressed at a few of these passes that he was, getting kind of, I would say, mossed on, if you could see. Josh Jenkins had one or two instances, but again, secondary wasn't really on its A game. Trey Long just recently joining in. It felt like they were discombobulated in that regard on defense. Offensively, I think it really just comes down to that they have not had a consistent floor at quarterback, and I don't know what's going on anymore, because I get why they picked up Hess, because they're saying, screw it, we'll have Hess as either backup or a guy that's in and a little more youth compared to Danny. Mm-hmm. And if Rakeem's here, we'll go with Rakeem. But again, Rakeem goes out after a half and he's not back. And credit, I don't want to speculate on injuries or anything, but we did this earlier in the year where it seems like he's in one game, he's not in one game. He's in for a half, he's not in for a half. What's the deal? You can't have that kind of inconsistency if it's a player that's on and off or not. And I'm not saying that this is what's happening, or I'm not going to insinuate on what might specifically be happening, but that doesn't help. And to me, you might as well, like when you go and play Jacksonville, when you guys do the game day setup, like my 2 cents just to early put on is just throw Joseph Hess in. Screw it. Like he's already been there all year. And I know he was let go, but you might as well, because he's available. I would not. Rakeem is to me the better talent, but if it's just going to be like one half and he disappears again, that's not going to do anything for you in a playoff game. But that's what we're dealing with. Defensively, there's no cohesion right now. It feels like the secondary is just getting lost every few series. Offense, you can't get anything going because your quarterback's always being changed out. You have good receivers. Clarence Williams was a number 1 receiver last year. He has been reduced to a number 2 at best because of target share. And credit, Darius Prince is here. We assume that was going to happen because he is a number 1 de facto receiver. He is your top guy. Wherever team he goes to, he is generally going to be the top guy. Maybe not Jacksonville. He might be trying to fight for targets there. But any other team in the NAL right now, he's your number 1 guy. And, man, it stinks that Williams and company get kind of bogged down, but it seems like you can't get as much, I think, going because if you're a quarterback coming in, you're going to go, well, Darius is my go-to guy. If I'm the new one switched in, I'm just going to go with Darius. I have much more trust over him. And you see it every game now. Even with this one, he got 90 yards like you're talking about, but I'm with you. Darius, for his production, should be getting like 130 or something like that. Mm-hmm. And there were a few passes during this one that I'll give credit to West Texas defenders. They knocked down a few passes that if they go a different way, I feel like scoring possessions happen more frequently and Orlando does get a win. Because you saw Orlando was settling for field goals a lot more. It was almost like they were trying to copy West Texas. Who could kick the most field goals in their own game against West Texas? Which West Texas, as we've talked on this show, and as we know about when we've seen Coach Tate Smith run their offense, he likes to go for the field goals, which I get. But it was weird because even with the Preds, and Dylan Barnas is a good kicker, but it felt like they were settling, which I was like, yeah, you have nothing to play for in this game, but you're settling? You're doing the same thing that your opponent's doing right now, and you have more firepower? That didn't make sense to me.
Yeah. But also, Phil brought up a good point last week. 2 teams in this playoffs have consistent quarterbacks. Malik Henry and Sam Castronova.
Yes.
2 teams in this playoffs have inconsistency at the quarterback position. Orlando and San Antonio. The 2 teams that have consistent quarterbacks are the top 2 seeds. The teams that are inconsistent are the bottom 2.
I'm sensing a pattern.
Sense a pattern where your quarterback is not main reason, but he is one of the main contributors to success. Carolina has Malik Henry's had a honestly, if Sam Castronova wasn't playing this year, Malik Henry could very well be a front runner MVP because of his performance. Offensive Player of the Year, of course, maybe this year, but there's a lot of candidates. Sam Castronova has had a hell of a year. He has like one of the most ridiculous touchdown interception ratios of any arena football quarterback in recent history. Pretty dang good.
Yeah.
I think it's like 47-2 or
It's
51-2. It's crazy. It's a number where you look back and you look at breaking down games. It's just basically a lot of people, a lot of fans, a lot of critics don't understand when you break down football games. If it's outdoor, if it's indoor, if it's backyard, it's funny how it always comes down to the single caller. It doesn't matter the analytics. Doesn't matter what the temperature outside or if the AC is blowing hard enough or the sun's out. It also depends on who the single caller is. And we've seen teams in the past in the NAL have great quarterback play. Last year, look at the two teams that made the championship game: Albany and Carolina. Jonathan Bain, Sam Castronova. 2 years ago, Tommy Grady, Mason Espinoza. 3 years ago after that, Jonathan Bain, Mike Faithful, Charles McCullum. 4 years after that, or 5 years after that, was Charles McCullum and Mason Espinoza. There's a trend with the names of the quarterbacks there. In arena football, I know this is being a nail into a drum, wherever you want, stupid terminology. I mess up on terminology, like being a dead horse. I think don't whatever. Quarterback play in arena football is crucial. The better quarterback you have, the further you'll go, no matter what. Yes, there will be some games where you'll upset a team that has the better quarterback and you caught on fire. But when you look at the two teams that are the two lower seeds entering this week's games, they have a question mark at the quarterback position. But one of those two teams has a pretty solid team around that quarterback position that doesn't need cohesion, doesn't need time to gel. They're a solid team from that. And they have two quarterbacks on roster where if those two guys caught on fire, they're a scary team, and that's San Antonio.
Yes.
This whole season with Orlando, we saw spurts of, oh, this looks good. Oh, this looks good. But you look at the opponents they played on those spurts, you go, oh, Albany. Okay. What do you expect? They did against San Antonio, which was almost like, I think, a buzzsaw for San Antonio. They just a long road trip after a fought loss to Jacksonville. So they're trying to rebound. But when you look at those two games, Orlando has Danny Southwick. The offense looked incredible. But you mentioned it. Cato has a great talent. Hess done well for Orlando early in the year. But inconsistency in Orlando all revolves around the single caller. What does the other three teams have? At one point, the other three teams in the playoff field have had a consistent quarterback. Arvell, Malik, Sam. Orlando has always been a turnstile. Is it Hess? Is it Danny? Is it Darius? Is it Cato?
We don't know.
It's just a circular pattern there. But we know as guys who have covered this sport over the last 2.5 years, we look at Orlando's roster and go, that's an all-star team of talent. Then you look over in Carolina and go, well, that's an all-star team too. And you look at Jacksonville, well, of course, they're an all-star team, and they're probably led by the MVP right now. It's just so hard when people say, well, Orlando's 4-8. It's like, yeah, they're 4-8. They had a hard year. But technically, will they be in this position right now if other teams are still in the league? We don't know. But the talent they have on that team, it got them to this point. They got enough wins to get to the 4 seed. So now Throw away the 4-8 record. Throw away the 10-3 record by Jacksonville. It's 0-0. It's win or go home time. It's postseason time. And the touch up last about the West Texas game. Yes, West Texas had some great moments, great finish, dramatic ending of the game. It was a very exciting game at the end. But it's almost like a decompression type. Like, okay, the season's over. Decompress. Let's see what we got to do next. And Orlando just came off of a heartbreaking loss. All the way in Odessa, have to come back to Orlando to get a couple days of practice, maybe miss a day of practice, and you have to drive up north to play your rivals again in Jacksonville in the Shark Tank, which tickets are going off like crazy right now for that playoff game in Jacksonville. Fan Appreciation Day. Get your tickets now, 621-0700, extension 170.
It's been a few years since we've seen a home Sharks game. So
In the closest, yeah.
Right, in the postseason. So that's definitely going to be popping off. I mean,
2019.
Right. Also number 1 seed. So if you win, people get to go right back to Jacksonville.
Correct.
Or well, they're in Jacksonville, but you know what I'm saying. They can go right back to ViStar next week, the week after that is, to see a game. So big deal again.
So speaking of that, the playoffs are here. Playoffs.
Don't talk. Well, sorry, we're going to talk about them because I could make that joke, but sorry, playoffs are here. It's time. Discussion. We got the official seedings. Jim's got this beautiful graphic as always, bringing you up to snuff on what the bracket's looking like. As we've discussed the Sharks and the Predators for a while, we knew this was coming up. These two are playing. Honestly, we knew both these matchups are coming up. The only question we had was who's getting the home game with Carolina and San Antonio, and the Cobras. You know what? They got and took care of business. They rallied, did what they needed to do. All the pieces fell into place. Folks in Greensboro, you get one more game to get to play over at the Greensboro Memorial Coliseum. That'll be a fun time. Gunslingers got a week off, and we'll be fascinated to discuss their decision at QB that we might be having to talk about. But here's your playoff bracket, folks. 1 through 4 teams. Semifinals coming up now. Championship next week.
No more standings, no more media polls, no more nothing. It's 4 teams, 2 wins. Championship will be claimed next Saturday or next Sunday here in the National Arena League. And of course, if you are in Carolina, listen to our show right now. Zach Brown's listening to our show. I know that for sure. Tickets are on sale now. Visit CarolinaCobras.com. Go to Ticketmaster. Tickets are available on Ticketmaster, or call the ticket office now to get your tickets for the playoff game against the San Antonio Gunslingers. Ticketmaster does have West Texas as the team, but it's the San Antonio Gunslingers, 2 versus 3 seed in that matter. And just FYI to the fans out there about the playoffs, home teams are 13-2 in the playoffs in the NAL. The 2 teams that are currently still in the league that have been in the postseason are undefeated in the playoffs when they're at home. That is the Jacksonville Sharks. That is the Carolina Cobras. Both those teams are 8-0 at home when they're hosting a playoff game. When they're on the road, they're both defeated. Carolina's 0-2 and 0-3, and Jacksonville is 0-2. So, home cooking both in Greensboro and in Jacksonville. Remember, tickets are on sale. Sharks.com, Ticketmaster, also CarolinaCobras.com on Ticketmaster, and the local office, Jacksonville, 671-0700, extension 1701.
What a perfect time to take a friend or somebody new to a game than a playoff game.
Correct.
Perfect atmosphere. So, hey, you got some buddies looking for something to do. I'd say this is a good, affordable way to get in on a professional playoff game and get probably, arguably, maybe the second most exciting experience of the year. The championship is going to be the most exciting experience. I'll be frank. No matter where it's at, it is the most hyped experience of the NAL season. But this is a perfect time to go if you are looking to get in on the action. Get someone new in on the action. Trust me, you bring someone to an arena football game, it is 99 times out of 100, someone's going to say, wow, I love this sport already. It happens every time. It's how the sport gets built. You bring someone new in, they fall in love with it. It's just
Correct.
how it is. So bring a new buddy along for some two competitive games that I'm looking forward to very much so.
And
You know,
also, if you go to the Jacksonville Sharks, if you're in Jacksonville or you're traveling to Jacksonville, you're going to be very well entertained. We do have a PA guy who is a genuine dude.
you might
He
have
has
had him on the
something.
show.
We might have him on the show. Yes. Might have him on the show again this week. He has something special for the Predators this week. He's been working on it. You guys are going to enjoy it.
I know where this
But
is going.
speaking about Jacksonville, we got to recap the game of the week from last week and the final game of the 2023 season. Holy crap, I'm everywhere. Thinking about postseason. That's what's going on. The 2023
Oh my
season.
gosh.
I was thinking 2017, which is the first year. 2023 season, the Jacksonville Sharks traveled to Carolina Cobras and dropped their final game to the Cobras 50-37. In this game, Eddie Brill got the start for the Jacksonville Sharks. A couple players didn't make the trip for the Jacksonville Sharks. And you could tell how the game was played. Jacksonville was just getting their reps in my opinion. Not putting their players in major risk of getting hurt. No one was hurt for both sides. That's good news. But you have to tip your hat to Carolina. They took care of business. They controlled their own destiny. They took care of business, got the two, and got that pivotal home game in the postseason against a team they recently played in San Antonio twice back in Greensboro. One of the things that stepped out and that really got my attention in this game is even though Jacksonville did not have Castronova starting, Renfro didn't play, there were also a couple other players that didn't play. I was very intrigued how this game was still a one-possession game late in the fourth quarter. And that just tells me a lot about Jacksonville. I know there's going to be a lot of fans out there that say, well, Jacksonville should have started Sam Castronova. No, you don't start your starting quarterback and some of your key receivers when the game doesn't mean anything to you. It's like how Jacksonville Jaguars did a couple last year in the NFL. They benched honestly, they sat half the offensive playbook or team against the Houston Texans in the meaningless game when they know they have the Tennessee Titans going the following week. They're not going to put any of their players in risk of getting hurt. What happened?
Mm-hmm.
Benefited Jacksonville. They beat the Titans, made the playoffs, and then they beat the Chargers. And so history, great year. But anyways, trying to make a comparison. It's a situation where you look at other professional leagues, especially in football, where the one seed's pivotal. You get the one seed, you get home field advantage, but also in some other leagues, you get the one seed, you're off for the first round of the playoffs. Jacksonville, the one seed, they know they're home next week. Why risk putting your star players in the injury, getting hurt, in a game that really doesn't mean nothing to you in the standings for ratification that, you beat Carolina? The history between us and Carolina goes a couple of years. We're very even with each other in the standings in the history. But I understand where a lot of Shark fans or a lot of people outside of Carolina, Jacksonville, saying, why did Jacksonville not take this game seriously? They didn't want to put players in risk of getting injured. That's the main reason.
Completely it. That's absolutely it.
Yep. And also,
Completely it.
I got to give credit to Jensen Stoshak, Cam Solomon, for letting our boy Eddie Brill throw money. A couple touchdown passes. You could tell by Eddie he was still a little inexperienced in playing arena football. But still, the battle that Jacksonville had, keep this a one-possession game in the second half, was pretty interesting. Also, the Aussie, Mayer, got his first deuce in the game. So that was exciting. It was erased by T.C. Stevens. He got the deuce right off the next possession. But there were some moments in the game that were exciting. But go to the side of Carolina. When they forced turnovers, they capitalized on those turnovers. Zach Brown, the one-man band, Zach Brown was the star of this game. Couple of sacks, a forced fumble, a sack. I think he had 2 rushing touchdowns, so he was everywhere. The Iron Man of the week, in my opinion, for this week. He got a recognition from us. We're not going to tell what we gave him for, but he got a recognition from us, from the ballots. this game to me was Carolina's chance of let's get the 2 seed. Let's get a playoff game. Let's not show anything to Jacksonville, but get the win. For Jacksonville, let's not get any of our main guys hurt, but still play a competitive game. And let's see where it was at in the fourth quarter, which happened. It was 2 teams that they knew they're playing next week. They got playoff games, and we're not going to show a lot. They're not going to put guys in risky situations or put in situations where if you lose like an Adam Smith in the fourth quarter, a game that's decided, that would have hurt. Or Sam Casanova got a lineman rolled up on his ankle in the first possession of the first game of this game. That would have crushed Jacksonville. So, as a Sharks fan, does it suck to lose? Yeah, you don't like losing. Losing's not fun. Winning's very hard, but winning's great. But I knew where Gibson was going. I know how he approached this game. In Carolina, I knew what they were going to do. Get it done. You control your own destiny. Get the win. Get the 2 seed, and get ready for San Antonio. I'm going to say South Carolina. It's not college football yet, Jim. A couple of weeks, though. There's other expansion news happening, ladies and gentlemen. Not in the NAL. It's college football. It's pretty big.
Right.
But that's not this show. We can dig into it, but it's not this show. But for Carolina's sake, 2nd seed, they did enough to win the game, but they didn't show what they didn't want to show everything because they know they possibly play in the Shark team in a couple of weeks, but they got to take care of business against San Antonio. Same as Jackson has to take care of business against Orlando. And we'll talk about that later this week. We'll have your videos later to break down whatever for the game day. And our guest will be special announced, and I got to get 2 football players this weekend. So I'm going to be busy this for game day. I'm excited. It's postseason. Got to get ready for it anyways. But to cap off this game, the stars of the show this game, it's our unofficial mascot of the Inside the Walls podcast. That is Zach Brown, the one-man band. He showed out no matter who is on the other side of the field. He doesn't care if it's a reserve or a backup player or the starter. He's going to outplay you. He did that. Cam Solomon had a couple of bright moments, a couple of touchdowns. Jensen had some great catches. He made a great catch in the game that got called back for a holding.
Yeah, that one-hander was amazing, but there was a push-off.
Yes.
And they'll ding you for that if you show it enough. Is the problem.
Also, Micah Robinson had a hell of a game. Started the game a little chippy. I would expect him to get a flag for a certain thing he did, but he didn't. But he still had a solid game. Naquan Murray did Naquan Murray things. Adam Smith, every time that guy touches the ball, you're like, oh, God, he's going to the end zone. He did it a couple times as a receiver. He didn't do it as a kick returner this time. But there were some moments. Again, I think Carolina did what they had to do to get the win without showing Jacksonville their whole offensive playbook. And Jacksonville, I think, just wanted to get to the fourth quarter, be competitive, and see where it fell. Win, great. Lose, we got Orlando next week back home in the Shark Tank. So overall, this past week for me, especially for between this game, I think it's 2 organizations that really didn't care about this past game, but they knew the outcome already, and they just needed to do enough to get where they were at because they have bigger stakes at play in 7 days, and that's hosting playoff games in Greensboro and in Jacksonville. So they're the top 2 teams. So that's my review of that game.
I like Jacksonville's decision to sit Sam Castronova and give him a break.
Smart decision, in my opinion.
It is because, I mean, look, like I said, meaningless game to you right now. You just want him to be healthy for the playoff stretch anyhow. Might as well have no chance of it being a problem. And again, you have a pretty talented, you have a group of guys around you, and Eddie Brill's not too shabby to where you still can come out there and give the expectation, hey, even if we are resting folks, we still can go out there and try and get a win. And I'll be frank, right. They were in a position there at least late in the third into the early fourth, where you felt like they were going to be within a possession, and maybe you could see them sneaking in an extra, like an onside kick immediately after a TD. But really good play by Micah Robinson, shut things down in the red zone, and really just ended the contest in general. Yeah, right. Cobras chipped in a field goal later, but it was pretty much over. Zach Brown gets a sack within a minute. Time just chips away. Game's over. 50-37 contest. So, but that being said, I got to give Jacksonville credit again. It's not just the fact that Castanova's out, but defensively, I think there were some showings that I said I was putting a thumbs up and going, nice job. Because if I account for the amount of field goals that Carolina settled for in this one, and the fact that they didn't score touchdowns or extra points on them, and I'm talking about points where it's either made or not made, as well as for four and outs that didn't go their way, or the end of the half where they couldn't convert a touchdown. Jacksonville made Carolina leave 22 points on the field in total. And that's with the 50 that they scored on the night. So, got to be honest with you, red zone defense for the Sharks was actually pretty solid. It was really good showing for them because, got to be honest, Malik Henry and company it looked like they were uncomfortable. If you had to go inside the 10, and it's harder to score inside the 10, people will tell you, because you have a lot less room for traffic, and good teams figure it out, and they are generally a good team. It felt like the Sharks had things locked down for the most part. Once you got inside the 10, they would just kind of like clamp up. So something to take away, even if it's a game where maybe, if you're Carolina, you're not showing as much, but you feel like, hey, we can still pretty much get this win. Let's just take care of business. They still had to fight for every inch of their yardage going that other way. Not to mention, Marvin Ross got a nice interception off a tip ball that did set them up to potentially get this one where they could be back in that onside kick scenario. Just, things happened, fumble happens, game ends, and away you go. But I got to give props. Jacksonville's defense showed up. Carolina, I think that's something they'll have to address going into the Gunslingers contest is, they've had success against the Gunslingers, but hey, what can we do a little bit better in the red zone to kind of open up some opportunities, maybe not feel as clammed up? Because that was their biggest issue, even in a win. They left points on the table. Really felt like they could have easily gotten up to 60 or so on the field if they had just executed in the red zone a little bit better. San Antonio's got a week off, so you can't have those similar mistakes or similar, I would say, lapses again. It's still a good team. This was a team that was number one in the league last year, or number one in the league all year up until recently in seeding. And odds are that if it's Robert Kent coming out, he's got more time to get prepped. So got to be able to score 1-for-1 every possession. And, Jacksonville did their job. They kept him in game. I was really impressed by that. A lot. James Fuller had a bit of work on his hands a lot on Saturday night.
No. And you got to give credit to Jacksonville on that great defensive showing. They're a defensive-minded team. Even though it doesn't seem like it, arena football is pretty hard. Jacksonville is a defensive-minded team with an explosive offense. And that's a deadly combination. And Carolina is similar to that. Carolina's defense is pretty dang good, too, and they have a pretty good offense. Crap, we have Malik Henry a couple weeks ago throw 10 touchdown passes. That's incredible. That's pretty hard to do, but it's still pretty incredible.
Yeah.
And also, I got tip my hat to the fans that showed up in Greensboro. It's a nice showing. Don't know the official number, but I think it is the biggest crowd they had all year. And for overall, the season itself, with the ups and the downs that we've had, and the nuggets we shared last week of what's coming pretty soon, it's pretty exciting for the game itself. And if you thought arena football was exciting during the regular season with some of these matchups, postseason is just more intense.
It is.
You have a rivalry being played in Jacksonville this Saturday night between two organizations that do not like each other, and a future that's still up. You can say it's still up in the air, or it's questionable. So there's going to be a lot on the line in this game. In Greensboro, you have a San Antonio team that at one point was the number one team in the league with the standings. Basically, they were the Carolina Cobras from last year. Started off hot. The league caught up with them, then surpassed them. And then you have Carolina, who's basically did the reversal from last year. Started off sluggish early, caught on fire at the end of the year, and now they're one of the hottest teams. So you have four storylines for four franchises. You have two teams that have won championships in the NAL. And this year, we will be claiming a new champion, even because of the results of having one of our previous organizations. It all starts Saturday night at 5 o'clock, or no, 7 o'clock Eastern. Stinks that both games are on the same time.
Yeah. Double screen
But
it, though. You can do that.
yeah, I'll be doing that while I'm in Jacksonville enjoying a very hostile environment. And then this time next week, we will know where the championship game location is at. And hopefully by then, we'll have some venue announcement to announce of a live show for the championship game. FYI, we already know where we're going if it's in Jacksonville. But overall, we're going to have people question this. Is there any chance that Orlando can host? The answer is no. They're the 4 seed. They will have to travel no matter where they go the next 2 weeks. San Antonio can only host if Orlando wins. Carolina can only host if Orlando wins. Jacksonville hosts no matter what the 2 games, as they are the 1 seed for the postseason. But you'll give your breakdown later in the week, probably, Zach. But to close out the show, this is your only time too. What is your feelings on a Tuesday before postseason action begins this Sunday or Saturday? Excuse me, I'm getting the days confused again. This Saturday.
Right now, I am very confident, at least, that I think Jacksonville's going to host. That is call that my declaration for prediction. I'm very confident that the Sharks have their things in order. That they're going to be hosting come next weekend in Jacksonville, Florida. I think I will personally be curious and a little more intuitive on the Cobras Gunslingers game because I think that's the one that has a little more intrigue. And I say this for the facts that even with the Gunslingers losing 2 straight to the Cobras in the last 3 weeks, you have a team that got a week off to kind of study, experiment, get its stuff in order versus one that is on the hottest streak in the league right now, heading against each other and in for a big clash. Also to see the Cobras fandom come out for a playoff game. Because no matter what the outcome is there, unless it is Orlando getting the ultimate upset, that is most likely to me going to be their final chance to go to a home game and root for their guys on the turf. But I would say I don't fully have a prediction now on that contest. I feel Jacksonville's going to be, no matter what, I think they will be hosting. No matter who wins in Carolina, I think you're going to see them in Jacksonville on, I think it's August 12th that they're going to be playing there, if that was the case. But hey, maybe I'm wrong. Otherwise, get ready for explosive offense for 3 of these teams. I'm not so sure the Preds will show up. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe they get some fire under them. I just haven't seen it yet. But expect Jacksonville, Carolina, and San Antonio to put up big points and for some chippiness in these 2 contests at some point or another. I don't think they go out of hand. I just think that its intensity is more great. The stakes are higher, but expect some high scores for at least 3 of these teams.
Yeah, the good thing about the postseason football is they're here today, and 2 of them are gone tomorrow.
Yeah.
So, and
cold truth.
yeah, so we're down to 4 teams. Again, if you're listening on the podcast platform, Orlando is traveling to Jacksonville. The game is 7 o'clock on August 5th. That's this Saturday. And San Antonio is traveling to Carolina. That's also on August 5th at 7 o'clock Eastern, 6 o'clock Central for you fans in San Antonio for your game itself. So postseason football is here this Thursday night. No, Friday. I think it's Friday we're doing it. I don't know. I got to check. I have
You'll
another
figure it
special
out.
guest. I have another special guest. So it's either going to be on normal time on Friday afternoon or a live stream Friday night. Don't know yet. I'll get the stuff figured out by this time. So coming Friday, you will have 2 guests on the show from the 2 visiting teams. We'll have an Orlando Predator player and the San Antonio Gunslingers player for this week's game day to break down both playoff games. And we'll have a special co-host sitting, or not sitting, but right next to me, also this Friday for NAL Game Day Playoff Edition. Playoffs? We're talking about playoffs? For the National Arena League. And then Zach will return most likely for Rebound. Am I correct?
I should be available. Like I said,
Okay.
Depending on what happens, if things get in the way for either of us, you should expect me for Rebound next week.
Okay. And then next week's game day will actually happen probably on game day at the arena. Just giving you a heads up.
So you'll enjoy that. Jim's gonna have that one in store for you for a good time. So.
Yes. So that's what's going to happen next week. But besides from that, ladies and gentlemen, again, we usually forget to do this, but please follow us on X,
the X now,
Instagram, Facebook, and also Threads. Threads is up, by the way. They said it's up. I still can't log on it, but apparently we have a Threads. So all of that is up and updated. But remember, you can follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and Threads. Also, X, Twitter. Twitter has an X, whatever. Or X is Twitter, whatever. You know where you can find us at. Social. Also, our Patreon. Go to Patreon/Inside the Walls podcast. They get early access to content, podcasts, interviews, and so much more. We'll be more active on that it's been a pretty hectic couple of days. Remember, for any up-to-date news related to the National Arena League, remember to follow us at NWalsPod on all our menu platforms. And again, for your number one source of breaking news about the National Arena League and its organizations, remember to trust your source here in Inside the Walls podcast. And also Zach when he wants to tweet too. So you can trust him as well because he has contacts too. But for that, I think I did all the homework. We're good. Yeah, we got everything situated. So,
yeah, you got all the bells and whistles out of the way. You did it all. But yeah, stay tuned to the social channels, guys. Be following along with the show. Support the show no matter who's on camera, of course. Jim's got the legs for it. And we're definitely going to be having a fun time leading into championship weekend next weekend, whoever's going to be playing. Again, I might predict Jacksonville. Doesn't mean it's going to be played in Jacksonville. So stay tuned for that info once we get through this weekend's edition of the semifinals of the NAL playoffs for the first round. And until then, see you guys whenever I come on next episode. See Jim next episode no matter what. And no matter what, you always remember one final thing before we go.
Don't be a Jack out of the box.
Until next time, everybody, I'm glad to be back on. Jim, I'll catch you for the next one. Stay tuned to this. Stay tuned to the show. See you then. This Friday. Thursday, Friday, it sounds like. We'll catch you at the end of the week.
Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, whatever. Later in the week, we'll see you.
See you later.
Covering all your favorite parts of the 50-yard fight. This is the Inside the Walls podcast with Zach Heilman and Jim Bernier.